G'day, wherever you may be in the interwebs. Welcome to another episode of Mastering Music, Mastering Life. I am Tony, Jack the Bear Mance, and we're coming to you from Deluxe Mastering in Melbourne, Australia. And I'm so delighted today with my guest. I've been a big fan of his work over the many, many years, and it just happened to be that I managed to track him down, and he was gracious enough to give me some of his time. So I'd like to introduce to you Bob St. John, all the way from, you Fort Lauderdale now?
I call it Miami for the most part, but yeah,
Miami.
Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood.
In
very, very far away from you.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, because that's interesting how you've relocated yourself. But Bob, welcome to the podcast, my friend. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for availing yourself, mate, because I know it's late over there. I mean, we're pre-recording the podcast. We do release it live and unedited, but I'm just aware of the time zone and the time over there. But thanks for waiting and availing yourself.
We're in the music business. We don't really sleep.
Or we learn to sleep faster. I think that's the the other life skill that we grab. So
I sleep actually right here, to be honest.
Yeah. So all right. So for those who aren't familiar with your work, you're probably best known for having an active involvement in all of the 5 Extreme albums, which have done exceedingly well. You've worked with Duran Duran, Collective Soul. You've won Grammys. You are an extremely well accomplished audio engineer and producer in your own right. You're still active in the game today, and so you're still at it. And you know, one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on, Bob, was one of the things of this podcast is, one of the aims of the podcast is to speak to people who have had life experience in the industry, and whether they are high profile or not, nonetheless, life experience is life experience. And we're just trying to inspire some young artistic creatives to get out there and involved, and for people to share their story. And so I think people that come with a great discography or history or reputation usually are people that are listened to a little bit more. So in the context of what I'm doing, mate, yeah, hopefully you'll be able to help a few kids along. So that's what we're going to talk about, amongst other things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're saying, so tell us what's going on with you at the moment in Florida. What are you working on, and just how's life for you? The present stage.
Right now, because of course I live in Miami, do a lot of music that's in Spanish. I say the majority of my Grammy nominations and the awards I have are for Latin rock albums. And I'm working with a band from Colombia called Don Tito. They're very well known there. It's a great project. Doing an EP, and I'm very excited to be working on it. Prior to that, I had a client from Canada named Adrian Rasso, who's like an instrumental guitar player. He had Mike Bland, who plays with Prince, and Lee Rocker playing bass on it. It's pretty incredible work on. Earlier last year, I got to spend a week over at Muscle Shoals at Fame Studio with Nuno and Steven Tyler. That was quite a trip. The whole thing I would consider a life-altering experience. And I haven't had a lot of those where I could say this is something amazing, but honestly, being there, place is just a part of music history. And for me, like a part of my childhood, because I grew up listening to pop music.
Yeah.
And everybody in Muscle Shoals were the sweetest people I had ever met. I'm looking forward to getting the project to go back there again with. It was really cool. The place is just full of history. It was built in the 70s. Pictures on the wall would just blow your mind. Just walking through there, it was an incredible experience.
So tell us what the project was and what was so life-changing about it. Was it the project, or was it just being there at the studio?
What happens is there's an album, a CD called, I'm old, call it an album. So a CD called Small Town, Big Sound. There was a compilation of songs that were recorded at Fame Studios. What we were doing was the Stones song, Brown Sugar. The Stones recorded Brown Sugar and Wild Horses there.
Yeah.
I want to say in the early 70s. And that was Nuno's brainchild, that he got Tyler involved on it, and came out really great. What made it life-altering was just the people, and working with people who, these guys start telling you stories about people that they work with. And you realize halfway through the story, they're talking about a record you grew up with, And that part to me was incredible. Everybody's humility blew my mind. They just walk in and they blow your freaking mind with their musicianship, the humility, and just their great ideas. And for Nuno and I, we were just both blown away watching them.
Yeah.
Tyler's a trip all into himself, but honestly, he's the genuine article. He lays down a vocal in 15 minutes, and we were done.
Yeah.
Just like
I couldn't believe it. I saw him on a podcast on Joe Rogan not too long ago.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
first of all, I was completely blown away just how good a shape he was in, considering his age and given what he put his body through and his attitude to life and how generous he was. And just hearing backstories about him and what he did. And quite often we don't hear these stories, do we, of people that are rock stars. There's a certain perception people have of them. But yet the reality is that for the most part, I haven't had as much experience dealing with the level of rock stardom that you have. But of the ones that I have met so far, there seems, and well, I've certainly met a lot of the upper echelon in the engineering field and through this podcast I have. And one of the great common denominators that I've found, and it's very, very refreshing, is the humility that people have and how they don't identify their job title isn't who they are entirely, and it's not necessarily where they get all of their validation from. As you said, they're just normal people that you meet next door, and you wouldn't think, my goodness, this guy worked with this band and this band, and yet they've still managed to be very, very grounded.
Right.
And as a youngster, when I got to meet engineers that I got to work with, that was one thing that was very apparent. And I thought, wow, that's one of the things that make people great. So I guess it's always important to be grateful for what you do and where you're at, and never forget where you came from.
Yeah, when you work with famous people, sometimes it doesn't even sink in that it's happening. Somewhere along the way, Nuno and Gary co-wrote a song with Steve Perry, and we recorded some demos up in Boston. This has got to be 20 years ago, and Nuno was sitting next to me. I mean, you got to remember that we basically grew up together. He was 16 when I met him. And we were cutting a vocal, and Steve Perry sings in that voice.
Yeah,
comes through the monitors, and he says, "Let's go back." And I says, "Oh, we're going to grab that other one. You're a little flat." So I go to push play, and Nuno whacks me with his knee. Says, "You just told Steve Perry he was flat." and I looked at him. I said, "I just got to put my head down because you got to act like it's cool."
Yeah.
This is before we ran around taking selfies of everything and documenting everything. You just lived the experience. That's really what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also there's an intention. I guess people, they know where you're coming from when you're working with them, and they're professional. They understand that everyone's on the same page and they want the same result. So while I'm sure there are rock stars who can be prima donnas from time to time, I think for the most part, the ones who are getting it will just go, well, hey, we're here to do a job. We're professionals. We're in, we're out. We'll do what we need. We'll do what needs to be done.
Right.
Yeah. So tell me, what's Nuno up to these days?
Last I heard, they were in the Monsters of Rock cruise. He keeps saying they're doing an Extreme album. I can't validate that or not. I worked on the Saudade de Rock, which I think was their 6th album. We recorded drums in LA, and he ended up doing the rest of the thing out there himself. And as far as I know, they're writing songs because I'm friends with all of those guys, and Gary told me he's been out to write with them a bunch of times, but I haven't heard any songs. Nuno's always doing something. I think he's got a record label now. He does writing. He does directing. He's always got his fingers in a lot of things. He's one of these guys who's in perpetual motion. Even we were at Fame Studios. Remember the last day we were there, we just did a mix in like 4 or 5 hours. We had to do the mix manually, which was kind of fun, old school.
Mm-hmm.
And we were walking out of the studios a Saturday morning, like 7:15. The sun, what it's like when you walk out of the studio at that hour, and the sun is so freaking bright. And I walked out. I looked at him. I said, "When was the last time we did this together?"
Yeah.
Because I went through about 7 or 8, maybe 8 or 9 years. We just didn't work together. Once he got his own Pro Tools set up, I was the happiest guy. Because the thing is, he has very exacting ideas of what he wants, and to be able to sit in front of a 24-track machine and hit, stop, play, record, 400 or 500 times in a row, really wears you out. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure I'm capable of doing that anymore. It's been so long since I've done it. And, you know, when we did Saudade de Rock, we did, basically, I think all we did was we were recording at NRG Studios in Burbank, and I think we cut just drums. But he had this notion that he wanted to cut the guitar in analog. And the manager came to me and says, "This is going to take forever." I said, "Don't worry, it's not going to take forever. I'm going to erase something somehow." And then he hates when I erase things. They called me Eraserhead for a while.
Right.
And it's like, he said, "Really?" I said, "Well, I'm going to do it deliberately." And I did. So we had a live performance, and I don't know, I punched in about 15 seconds too early. And the headphones, he says, "Hey, did you go in early?" I said, "Oh, well, yeah, I did." And, you know, he gets really stressed out. He's like grabbing his hair, and that ended us doing overdubs in analog.
Right.
He did the rest of the overdubs himself at home.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you work these days? So tell us, what's the typical? I mean, nothing's typical these days, but
the majority.
How do you work these days? So take us through your workflow with when clients get in touch with you now, and you're happy to work with them, and you come to an accord in terms of fee, etc.
Majority of my work is mixing. I'm going to say like 90% of it. I do some recording, but the thing is, I get burnt out in recording. I moved to Florida in like '97, and I was just totally burnt out on the rock and roll circus. As crazy as it sounds, and I've been doing this 35 plus years, I am not a night person. And which is it's a weird vocation, because musicians aren't even up before noon.
Yeah.
And so I decided, you know, I really just wanted to specialize in that one thing. From doing the Extreme albums here, I had met Susan Zakowski, she's Eric Schilling's wife now, and she ran Crescent Moon Studios, and I, you know, had become friendly with all those people over there, because everybody here was really nice. Larry, who was at New River, where we spent, you know, 6 months there doing Extreme 3.
Larry Janis. We're talking Larry Janis.
Larry Janis, right?
Yeah.
And the next record, I think Extreme 4, we were at Criteria, where I was there for like 5 months recording that too. And we mixed that one over at Crescent Moon. And she said, "Listen, I managed some engineers here. I can get you some work." And that's actually how I ended up coming here. And I realized that's really all I wanted to do was mixing. And she helped me get all of those jobs. You know, Eric's a very well-known engineer, and I got some of his overflow work, and I was able to build a clientele between the two of them, which was mostly Latin music.
Yeah.
My typical day here, because now, you know, nobody goes to a studio anymore. I mean, when I was at Fame, and last April, that was the last time I've been in an actual physical studio.
Yeah.
Most of the time, people send me, you know, files over the internet and pay me on PayPal. Where my clients come from is generally people who work with me generally only work with me. And that's, you know, some of my oldest clients I've been working with for 30 years. You know, Extreme I've worked with since, 1986, I think. And if Extreme did it, I've worked on it. Whether it's a live show, whether it's a video, I've done absolutely everything that they've done. The majority of my work now, new clients will come from Facebook or from word of mouth.
Yeah.
I can't say I've ever really advertised. I think back when I was in Boston, I did, but I got all sorts of riffraff who just wanted free deals. That's all it did was cost me money for the advertising.
Yeah.
And I'll usually start my days early. Usually about 7 or 8 o'clock, I'll come down, and I'll work a good like 12 or 14 hours, you know, throughout the day. And it's just mixing. I could say it makes me very happy to know, number one, there's no drive to work. The thing that I miss is having people around sometimes, and clients do come here. I've got a fairly big place. Clients will stay here. I like when they do that, because to me, that's part of the whole experience of doing a project. You know, and you know, even when I was producing bands more frequently, I would always try to get them out of their city, even if it was in the same state, because you need to feel like you're doing something of magnitude, of importance. And if you're, you know, just going home every night, I think that lets you decompress from it too much. I think you need to stay in the moment and say, yeah, I'm doing something that could be great here, you know?
Yeah.
So I love when I have people here. On the other part, you know, it's just like having guests in your house. Maybe you want them to leave after a while too.
Yeah, no. Well, I must say,
most of the time,
go on. Sorry. You finish off your point most of the time.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
Most of the time, I'll do the majority of the mixing without them here, and they'll come and spend 2 or 3 days just doing final tweaks before we actually bounce the finished mixes.
I was just going to say, I agree with you in terms of one of the, and I guess it's happening in mastering as well, where with the internet, so much more stuff is done online, and it's great from a consumer's point of view because I have so much more choice and availability to them. But there's something about having people in the studio and the interaction. And I know that there's some mastering places, for example, who charge more for an attended session, and I can understand that from a commercial point of view. It's a little bit more time, but one of the things I learned very early in my experience in America, and one of my earliest mentors, Rick Essig at Frankfurt Wayne, said to me, 80% of this job is bullshit. And by that, he meant it was the relationships and interaction, and when people, they felt good around you and connected and you're invested in them. The sessions are also more enjoyable, and I've enjoyed the attended sessions too. Sadly, it's slowly going by the wayside, but I agree with you, man. There's something really nice about being in the company of people and
there's a bonding thing that happens too.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I think that's how you end up keeping clients who stay with you for years, because not every engineer is going to be somebody you mesh well with. Also, you've got guys who just want to impose their vision on you, and that's it, and they're inflexible. You'll never hear anybody say that about me, and I've trained many engineers, and I've always said the same thing to them. I said, listen, don't copy me, be yourself, but I don't want it ever to come back to me that, you were working on a session and you didn't give somebody what they wanted. Because as engineers, very often we work on songs. I mean, I mix easily 300 to 400 songs every year.
Right.
And you're going to, just like when you're doing mastering, you do a project, and some things, they leave a mark in your soul when you remember them forever. Other things, they're just a job and you move on to the next one. Yes, you commit to it completely, but if I'm mixing something for somebody and I'm going to tell them what to do, and I'm not going to let them have what they want. If they wanted a distorted, delayed vocals with a whole song or something, I'm going to finish that project and move on to the next one. But they're going to listen to that CD for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And if I didn't give them what they want, if I didn't entertain it, if I didn't find a way to make it fit into what I thought it should be, then I failed them. And I said, if I hear you did that to somebody, I'm going to find you and personally kick your ass.
Yeah.
Because that's not what I taught people to be. I want, as an engineer, you have to be able to what's the word, morph, be a chameleon within every project. When you're dealing with one person, it's hard. When you're dealing with a whole band, it's even more dramatic. Because now you've got to make everybody feel like their opinion is the most important. And
massaging egos.
What, pardon?
Massaging egos.
Yes, that doesn't happen so often when you're by yourself.
Yeah.
Then what you're doing is you're collecting, notes from this guy and that guy, or you say, one of you act as the spokesperson and put together your notes, and I'll make your revisions.
Yeah.
And if I had a choice, everybody would come here and spend a couple of days here with me. I mean, from doing this for so long, I don't think about it at all. It's second nature to me. To be honest, when clients are here, I have more fun cooking for them and making them coffees than I actually do doing my job, because that interaction is part of it. And also, I think for them, it gives them a sense of belonging. They become part of the heritage that is being here.
Absolutely.
In the next room, it's in one of my Facebook posts. There's a big picture of the wall, and I've got two very large, they're like bulletin boards. And there are hundreds and hundreds of pictures of people working here. People working here, eating here, drinking coffee, or me spilling coffee on something, because that's generally what goes on. And it reminds me, this is who I work for. And people look at that, and next time they come there, they see their picture on the wall. Because to me, they're all part of my family. There's no greater honor, as far as I'm concerned, than when you bring me something and say, here, we want to go one step up from here. We want to go beyond what we've already got. Yeah. I think that's a privilege and an honor, and I never take it anything but totally seriously.
I don't blame you, and I guess that's why you continue to thrive in a current marketplace, which right now is, I don't know if saturated is the right word, but certainly, with the internet, we have so many more people online, and it really is a buyer's market at the moment in terms of what they can get and for the money they can spend. How are you finding, I mean, obviously someone like yourself with over 3 decades of experience, that has some worth to someone that is looking for people. And then there's the artistic empathy and musical empathy and all that kind of, the personal connection that you create with people. But how do you find in the current climate with the current economics of the music industry as it is it easier for you to survive because of the fact that you can lower your overheads, or have you found that you've been able to maintain a reasonable fee without going into figures and having to expose anything? But has it been tougher to maintain a level? Because there would have been a time when you would have been earning, dare I say, more because it was bigger budgets. But has that been able to keep in step with the current model?
I mean, the thing is that obviously the money that was once part of this business is not here anymore. There was the once upon a time when you're working for a record label, people were happy to pay you $3,000 a mix. That doesn't happen anymore. Both record companies don't want to pay it, the clients don't want to pay it, and so the thing is you have to adjust your workflow. I think that working in Pro Tools or on a computer and a workstation is far faster than working in the studio. Mixing in the studio is slow. There's a lot to consider. And, last time I mixed in the studio, I was certainly using Pro Tools and plugins and the console. But you're just realizing, especially when you've been working almost exclusively on a workstation, it's really hard to go backwards. Even though you think it's kind of cool to have all these knobs in front of you, I found myself immediately reaching for a trackball or something, because that's now where your mind goes. Yeah. And last time I did it, I was not in love with the concept, not from the workflow standpoint, but I did not see a commensurate change in the sound quality versus just being able to work at my house or just on the computer. The thing the computer allows us to do is more and faster. And that works. We're very fortunate that we can do that because people are paying less money. So obviously you've got to work more for less money so you can maintain a quality of life. Self-employment is never easy, especially being an engineer. It's never easy. And, people talk to me about doing it for a living. I says, listen, you have to consider there are more things than doing major rock albums. There's many vocations within this, And that's, you go to a recording school, they teach you a bunch of disciplines. Maybe one of them is going to speak to you more than others. Rock music will always be my first love. It's the thing I love recording the most. But, I started doing everything. I mean, there was a period definitely from, I'd say about 2000 to about 2008, 2009, 70% of my work was Christian music in Spanish.
Right.
And I did a lot of it. I mean, I'm talking, I would mix every month 2 or 3 CDs, whole albums. And the thing is, you have to be flexible and you update what you want to do. And, to me, they all get treated seriously. But I made a really nice niche market, specifically in Puerto Rico, for me with that. I talk to young guys about this sometimes. And, I talk about the old days in music business. I'm sure you remember, too. Money poured like spigot and the kitchen, and everywhere you went, it was you were getting $1,000 just to sit there and babysit guys in the van. Those days are over now. Nobody's going to come to you with a $500,000 record budget. They're going to say, here's 70 grand, good luck.
Yeah. Well, I think more and more musicians now are starting to do their own DIY. They're realizing that they don't need labels. They don't have to have labels around as much as they used to.
If you can make half the purchase price versus 12% of the purchase price, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I even think back in the day, Bob, I think that, even when we had physical sales and the perception of people was, there's lots of money to the artist. The artists weren't making that much money. They were usually taking, these advances were very exorbitant loans from the record companies, and everything was put on their tab most of the time without them even realizing it. And any money really was what there still was: touring, merchandise, and publishing if you're a songwriter. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And I don't think that's changed. And I don't think that's changed all that much in this day and age. I think records now, I just call them sonic business cards. and they just give people a reason to come out and see you.
But that's exactly what it is. It's a way to get you to go to the show and buy the T-shirts, buy the tour books, you know, and pay $200 to sit in the seat and watch somebody hold a cell phone over their head all night.
Yes. Do you still get out to see many shows when any bands come to town, or would you have any?
You know, the last show I went with my daughter, who's like, well, now she's 19. We saw Ariana Grande. Awesome production, awful music. Just, you know, my daughter, who I've been, you know, trying to educate in music, I said, listen, you know, there's somebody with an instrument and can sing, but I said, but you need to go backwards and listen to 70s R&B so you can understand where a lot of this stuff came from. I haven't sold her on it yet. She does listen to Frank Sinatra, though.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, so interesting. Okay, so a guy like yourself has got a profile in the business. So, from your daughter's point of view, you're just dad. I'm sure you're just like, yeah, whatever, dad. Yeah. The advice of to go back and listen to some 70s R&B would be treated with the same disdain as do your homework, go to college, you know, clean up your room.
Right.
Is it greeted with the same disdain? Like when you go on about, hey, you know, you should go back and listen to 70s R&B. Does she roll her eyes at you? It's like, oh, come on, Dad. You know?
It's my daughter is a music fanatic. You know, she doesn't play an instrument, but music has been her whole life since she was a baby. You know, my ex and I, we raised her on the Beatles. She learned the Beatles before she learned nursery rhymes, to be honest.
Oh man! The other day I was out with at a video shoot with my wife, and I swear to you, Bob, there was a bunch of kids, and they were like kids. They were early teens, and they were singing Beatles songs. I was absolutely floored.
It's incredible. And the thing is, remember, you'll never meet a person who loves guitar more than me.
Right.
I can't play guitar. Seriously, you know, we were doing one of the Extreme albums, and Nuno said to me, he says, "You don't play guitar, do you?" I said, "No, I play keyboards." He says, "You don't play guitar." He says, "It's the easiest thing in the world." He says, "I'm going to show you Smoke on the Water." I'm like, all right. So he's showing me Smoke on the Water, which I know is the easiest thing in the world, but I was not in the mood. I was having a bad day.
Yeah.
And so I picked up the guitar and played it. And he's like, "Dude, you can't get that?" I says, "No, I can't get it." He says, "You're a loser." Listen, it's not my thing. And you can flash forward about, 25 years, and my daughter got an acoustic guitar, and she's like, "Can you show me how to play this?" I'm like, "Well, the internet, I can figure this out." And within 10 minutes, you're making music. And play a Beatles song, and you understand the absolute beauty and joy of it. And for me, I'm like, that is a really cool thing. It is. And that stuff is timeless. You wouldn't say, best concert I ever saw was McCartney, without a doubt. And I've been to plenty of.
Was he solo? Or was he with Wings?
He was solo. It was I think it was the Driving Across America tour.
Okay.
It was back in the days when you can get a good seat and it wasn't $1,000.
Yeah. Yeah. He was recently here and he played 4-hour concerts and was just outrageously amazing, apparently.
Yeah.
Have you worked with him? Have you ever met him?
No, never met him, never worked with him.
Are there any people on your list that you like to? Is there anyone on your list that you haven't worked with that you would love to have the opportunity to work with if they came your way?
I've had 7 managers in my career, and I think the last manager I worked with asked me that, and I just looked at him with a blank face. I didn't quite have an answer because it's I love music in general, and I've worked on just about everything. I've done a lot of world music. I've done hip hop. I've done rap, R&B. Rock music would be my favorite thing, but I never have sat down and said, "Gee, I'd like to work with them." The jobs come to you when they come to you, usually by word of mouth or somebody hears a record. The Collective Soul gig came about because Ed Rowland had heard Nuno's Schizophrenic album, which is honestly not one of my best, examples of my work. But, it was a labor of love nonetheless. It was not an easy record to do. Nothing with Nuno ever is. We did some of it in Sydney. We did some of it in Boston. But he loved that record. And because of that record, and, an engineer said, "Oh, yeah, Bob St. John lives in town." And they needed somebody to do mixes that was nearby. There I was doing mixes. And, that led to doing 2 whole albums with them. you never know when people are listening. You never know what people think of you. You know, I
Absolutely.
don't. You know, if you know, you said to have some. If I was going to give some advice to somebody young starting out, is to make sure the art of engineering you will learn, but you really need to have the art of networking. I think it's more important once you decide this is what you want to do, to connect with as many people, you know. And you never know when some guy in a band you just take a liking to, you know, 5 years later he's in a major band and he can get you a gig. And I've had jobs come about like that just because I knew a person who knew a person who knew a person. You know, I mean, you have to be capable of doing the job and an easy guy to get along with, which is a really important thing. Um,
Absolutely.
there's a guy who was my assistant, Carl Napa, who worked with me for a good 4 or 5 years. I took him everywhere with me. He eventually went to work at the Hit Factory. And I remember because it's a Hit Factory in New York, which is gone now. And Troy Germano called me up and says, hey, he says, I got to thank you for bringing Carl here. Can you give me another guy like Carl? I says, yeah, Troy, I'm going to train these guys and just send them to you. Carl did very well. He ended up working for Nelly, and he ran Nelly's recording school until recently. And,
Wow.
so, yeah, in St. Louis.
There's something very satisfying about training young kids, and then who get up and then they fly the coop and they go off and they become successful in their own right. Isn't it a satisfying feeling, Bob?
It's super gratifying. You know, I'm very proud of him. And you know what? You know, he's a great guy. He was a great guy when he was working with me. What it is there's a certain thing to being an engineer that he has. I have, I'm sure you do too, where you get along with people and they like to be around you. Because the thing is, you're going to need to know to do your job. That's something you're going to learn. But being a good person, being easy to hang out with, being agreeable, you know, making everybody feel like they're the most important client, that's an important thing, you know.
Without doubt.
You know, people who work with me will say, gee, you're so humble. And I don't ever think in terms of humility, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm only as good as what I'm doing for you right now. And, you know, whether you heard a record I did or you know, it's some other local band I worked with, every one of those things had the same amount of love and thought put into them.
Yeah.
You know,
I think. Sorry, Bob. I've interrupted you again. I'm sorry. Continue.
You know, I always say to people that, you know, you have to. I don't know, it's just a metaphor I'll steal from a song from somebody I work with. But he said that you've got to love the art in yourself and not yourself in the art, because this isn't the kind of job you do because you want to be a rock star. And I've met engineers who want to be freaking rock stars, and they're annoying, you know. And I understand this. Definitely a modicum of arrogance will go a long way in the business, but after a while, people are just going to think you're a dick, you know. And you better be coming on with some super mega crap if you're going to be a dick. You know, I don't suffer arrogant people too well. And in this business, you know, we're full of them, but they generally work for record companies, and most of them are going away. So works out.
Well, I think it's important, and it's a great sign that when you get to our vintage, you can still find the passion for what you want to do. And I know one thing I tell a lot of kids is, before you get into this business, can you actually honestly answer why you want to do it? And a lot of people say, well, it's about the music. It's about the music. But quite often I find kids who get involved because it's, well, I'll get laid, or it's the perceived pathway to fame and riches. There's still a love for the music, but, you know, right. But there's other motivations there. And I think it's really important that kids get really honest with themselves about, well, why am I doing this? And as you said, if it's for the art, if it's for, you know, for me, I love doing this because I still get a kick out of being in a session with a band that have been through a process of pre-production, tracking, mixing, hearing a song over and over and over, and they're sick of it. And then they walk away, or they get a finished product where when they hit play again, it's like, oh, now they're hearing it from the perspective of Johnny Punch Clock. And it's a whole new experience for them. And so this birthing of a record or an EP comes together, and they're rejuvenated again about the music. I still get off on that all the time. And I love that aspect of the gig, you know, that you take them from dragging their feet into like being, whoa, okay, we're all vibed again.
there's something that on Facebook I've become known for is these occasional rants. It's actually just me blowing off steam or just offering up food for thought. And people will say to me sometimes, "Hey, I miss your rants." And sometimes, when you're really busy or you're just not in the mood, I haven't got time to do that stuff. I haven't got anything useful to say, so I won't say anything. And one of my past rants, I mentioned something that I miss is I'm sorry, I got off the topic. And one of my past,
Okay.
give me a second, man. Mine is a terrible thing to waste.
You were talking about something that you miss.
No, it's coming back to me. What it is I don't know if you are the same way. It sounds like you are, but we feed off other people's enthusiasm.
Absolutely.
And I'm very rarely wrong. I mean, I was wrong only twice with a client and a producer where I thought they absolutely hated me. This producer, Mauricio Gasca, super great guy, great songwriter, great producer, came to me with this project next. Some Christian artist, I can't remember if it was in English or Spanish, and very well produced. The guy's a brilliant arranger, and but he was very passive the whole time, just staring forward, and every now and then he'd offer a suggestion or whatever. And the whole time I'm sitting, I worked with him for a week, I'm thinking, this guy hates me. He doesn't want to be here. I think you and I might have been talking about this last time we were speaking, but you got to go in on a project and work. Sometimes there'll be a couple of producers, and one of the producers will say, "Oh, I want Bob to mix this," to the other producer who will want his engineer to mix it. And there I am in it. And those jobs are like going on a nightmare blind date with somebody who just broke up. And you spend the whole time hearing about, well, that's how John does it,
Yeah.
John he does a filtered ping pong delay. Do you do a filtered ping pong delay? I'm like, yeah, I just fell off the mixing apple cart 20 minutes ago. And I need enthusiasm from people. And eventually that guy did 3 more projects with me. And he says, I said, I thought you hated me. He said, yeah, he says, I don't get excited about a lot of things. People sometimes misread that. And I had a client like that who was, to this day, one of my best clients in my entire career. He sat on the couch in the studio, asleep. And I played him the mix, and I go, what do you think, man? And he goes, it's all right. I said, you hear anything you want to change? No, sounds great. And again, I'm thinking, this guy hates me. He became a very good friend. And, and I told him later, he says, I don't get that excited about things. Again, that thing we were mentioning earlier, you have people that bounce off of or, feed off of.
Yeah.
It really drives, for me, it drives me,
Yeah.
It makes me want to impress them more. It's not like, I've got a bag of tricks I'm going to pull out. I know usually what I'm going to do. I mean, I instruct people about this always when they want to learn about mixing. And says, how do you decide what you're going to do? And I said, what do you mean? The song tells you what to do.
Yeah, that's it. It's a common
song.
Yeah,
as you listen to it, the song is going to tell you what to do. And that doesn't mean what we do is so derivative of everything else all the time, but definitely it's going to guide you. If it's a music form you're unfamiliar with, then familiarize yourself with it. I probably, one of the more important projects I did in my career was this band called Top Choice Click. It was a rap hip hop band. And what happened was the guy, John P., came in and did the rap section on the Extreme song Cupid's Dead. And Nuno took a liking to these guys and decided that they'd be the first band he'd signed to his record label. Because they had just gotten a huge advance from A&M. It was after the success of More Than Words, and they negotiated something where he could have a label. And they went in, they were recording rap music in the back room of the studio while we were recording Extreme 3. So it got Nuno out of my hair, which was good. And, and I got to meet these guys. He says, hey, said, we're going to mix these songs. You want to mix these songs? And I'm like, I don't want to mix rap. Why do I want to mix rap? At that point, it was still like a lowly art form to me.
Yeah.
And So we went in, we were at Blue Jay Studios in Carlisle. We went back to Massachusetts. This is after, literally, it was 2 days after spending 6 months in Florida doing Spring Through. I, flew back to Boston, and then the day after that, we were in the studio doing this rap record. And this guy in the band, his name is Mike Fields, called him, his name in the band was Force. Young kid, he was 18, brilliant. Just one of these guys who he'd show up with a big bin of LPs, and he'd just start pulling loops, beats, grooves, music out of it, and he would make music out of nothing.
Yeah.
Out of just found music, I remember when they released the album, it was a nightmare. They had to clear dozens and dozens
of samples. Yeah.
And some people said, no, we don't want to use it. We'd have to go recreate it and put it back into the mix. But that project taught me, number one, to appreciate that art form and not be a baby, and not be an elitist. And everything I learned about how to operate with beats, lo-fi stuff, and deal with stuff that's all scratchy and noisy was through that project. And I remember before I did it thinking, I didn't want to do this. And at the time, I just, I got paid a lot of money to do it. I bought a really expensive stereo for my car. I was happy, and then I ended up doing a whole album for them after that. And then we educated each other because I taught this guy, who's brilliant about, how to put stuff together, and I would give him whatever he wanted. We're in the studio and he's like, hey, he says, one of these knobs does the low end. I says, this one. So we just turned it all the way up. I says, that how you want it? Yeah, man. Yeah. So I let him take it home. I knew it was going to suck.
Yeah.
He took it home, came back and says, how'd it sound? He goes, not that good, man. Not that good. I said, well, I wasn't going to tell you up front, but we really can't add that much bass. Yeah, I was blowing up in my headphones. Yeah, there we go. We educated each other, and that was important to me. There's Anthony Resta, who Anthony and I worked together for years, and Anthony's he's a producer, a multi-instrumentalist, a arranger, drummer, and Anthony met Mike also. And this guy just rubbed off on both of us. He's a kid, and he rubbed off on us.
Yeah.
Because we were receptive.
Yeah.
Because we didn't say, I'm not doing that rap shit. I'm a musician. And had we not done that, it wouldn't have led us to the Duran Duran gig.
Yeah, right.
Anthony came up with the Duran Duran gig through Dale Bozio from Missing Persons, who was in the band, of course, with Ron Cucurullo, who was in Duran.
Yeah.
And he heard some loops that Anthony did and said, hey, can you guys, can you mix songs? And he says, yeah, I got a guy that I mix with. And, we worked on, we just did one song for free. It's one of the 2 spec jobs in my entire career that panned out.
How often do you still get called up to do spec jobs? Do you still get people say, hey, would you do us a little freebie, and if we like it, you'll get to do the album, and we're a label, and we'll go work. Do you still get that shit?
Every now and then, but usually it's somebody I know, and I know they're not gonna screw me, or or the other part of it is it's just something I really want to do. Sometimes you just hear some great music, and that they don't have any money. They're not going to get any money, but if it fills up your soul, if you can sit and listen to it and like be beaming with pride, that's I should be paying them as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
That to me, that's absolute euphoria. Now, if you can get paid for it and have that experience,
that's
and
a
have
bonus.
the client that happy, there's
absolute bonus. Yeah.
The jazz artist, his name is Steven Santoro, and I've known Steve since we went to high school together. And he helped me buy my first piece of multi-track equipment. He gave me $500. I remember I pulled together the money I worked all summer for. My mother gave me $1,000. Another guy gave me $500, and it was $3,200 for a Tascam 8-track.
Right.
It's my first machine.
But that was big money back then. That was still pretty. That was reasonable coin.
I still have the bill of sale for it. It's 1982.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And that guy eventually ended up being on Atlantic, and I've done every album except the one on Atlantic. I've done every project, and that stuff I can sit and listen to over and over again. I love working with him, and he doesn't like working with anybody else. And I've got a lot of clients like that where they just can't picture it unless I did it for To me, that's really gratifying. You know, it's even funnier when somebody goes off the range and works with somebody else and they come back crying about it. That's called vindication. I'm sure that happens to you, doesn't it?
Oh, look, my experience with all that basically has been, it's always nice to think that you'll get to have a client and hang on to them. I'm also, I also realise that I can't do everyone's record, and I certainly don't want to. But yeah, on some occasions, in my case, artists have gone off and gone elsewhere, and it can be for various reasons. One is we've got a label deal now, and so we have the opportunity to work with Bob Ludwig. You know, we want to be able to tell our grandchildren that we have Bob Ludwig. Who can blame them? Who can blame them? Then you got others who just there's politics, there's record label situation. I think what I've learned, and I think what's important, is that invariably all of us are going to experience that situation where people that first of all, don't assume anything. Always work the record like it's the last time you'll ever see them. So that's a bonus. But if they do go elsewhere, it's not personal. It's not personal. I think the big mistake is when we take it to heart and of course it's hurtful. We'd like to think they're going to come back. But when I learned that, for the most part, it's not about me and it's not personal, I tend to swallow it a lot easier. And like you said, invariably, when the deal's done or something else has happened or the band has gone off to a new project, then quite often they come back and say, hey, man, look, I'm really sorry about what doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. You're here now. Let's make some beautiful music together.
People don't understand how a record works, how a record deal works. And that, you know, yes, they give you $100,000 to do a record and you recoup it, but you don't realize that they own it, even though you've paid them back.
Yeah.
In what business can you do that?
Yeah.
You won't get around.
That's what I said to kids. I said, imagine buying a house and you pay for you pay the mortgage. You pay exorbitant amount of interest on the mortgage, but you're also told what color to paint the walls, how to landscape the garden, and you never own the bastard. You pay it off and you still pay for it. You're still going to pay for it, and you're still going to be told you're still going to be their bitch. You know, it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of people don't find it out till years later. Now that you've got streaming, you know, the fractional royalties are bad as it is, and then you realize that you can't even make any more unless you were the songwriter. There you go. That stuff has really harmed the business. I remember telling my daughter that's why we don't steal music, because, you know, somebody else's daddy is an engineer, somebody else's daddy's in a band, you know, and this is how daddy puts food on the table and buys you Barbie dolls.
Yeah, yeah. Do you still buy a lot of music these days yourself? Do you have time to listen, enjoy music?
I would love to say I listen to popular music, but I don't listen to as much of it. Generally, people will bring something to my attention and say, check this out.
Yeah.
So much of what I hear now is offensive to my ears.
In what way?
I've got a real issue with the loudness wars and the way things are mastered. Everything's distorted. And it makes me crazy because there's no excuse for it, you know.
Well, I think especially now the streaming services, now that they bring the levels down anyway. I think, you know, minus 14 LUFS or something Spotify is, but you're absolutely right. I think that is slowly starting to change. Although, depending on who you're dealing with, man, there's still people that are just not loud.
I was with the dynamics back, you know, and the thing is, there's actually no excuse, because I know, like, you know, the two Black White albums that sold well, the one that won the Grammy and the one that we did last year, Ted Jensen mastered both of them. Let me think for a second. Yeah, those were plenty loud without being distorted. And I think, you know, George Marino had mastered the other one before that. Again, it was inexplicably loud without distorting. Because a lot of stuff I get back is just distorted. And, you know, I call the mastering engineer up and piss them off. But it's like, you know what? I don't want to hear the distortion, and I don't care if it's not slamming loud the whole time. You and I grew up listening to music, not peak limiting.
Yeah, well, don't forget, you know, the other thing too, back in the day, mate, when it was all vinyl, I mean, there was a mechanical medium and there were certain limitations that you couldn't get away with on a lacquer. So, you know, it was different. It was just really with the advent of digital and limiting and whatnot. I mean, ones and zeros are ones and zeros, right? Doesn't matter how many LUFS or how much widening or how much in and out of phase, it's still ones and zeros at the end of the day. So I think that's part of the reason why. And I think also there's a multitude of reasons, man. I think also when you're young, your formative years, there's a different sense of romanticism around it and memorabilia around it. plus the fact that, you know, it was an era where you now had to play. I mean, there was no auto-tune, right? There's no beat detective. There was none of that shit going on. Maybe some creative editing, but you had to be able to replicate that shit live on stage. So it's just a different era. And so I get the point you're making. But when it comes to the whole dynamics thing, I've just always viewed loudness as a commercial imperative. And left to my own devices, I generally just try and go for some level of optimum. And I'd rather get the feedback of, listen, can you maybe squeeze a little bit more? Than, oh, you maybe have overcooked it. But again, this comes down to discussion with the client and what they want. And, you know, but you should be able to work. Like you said before, the music should speak to you. I think you should just kind of get it. There should be this sense of empathy and this idea of like, I can see the promised land. I know where they want to go. Yeah, I can facilitate this process. And so do you get in this day and age, I'm assuming you could probably master your own mixes and do a damn fine job, but do you still outsource mastering yourself? And if you do you have any guys that you particularly like working with, or is it a client decision, or how does that work in your world?
What's happened is, especially with the Christian albums that I did in Spanish, people had small budgets, and people would say, listen, you know, I've only got, you know, $3,000 to do this whole thing. And, you know, that included mastering. When I master the stuff myself, I don't enjoy mastering the stuff myself that I do. That's to me, I would prefer another set of ears on it. But the reason I started doing more of it is because the ears they were using to do it were awful. Yeah. I swear somebody got T-Rex and went through and just blasted through it. And the thing is, I don't spend, you know, being underpaid for a week for somebody to screw this up. Yeah. And the thing is, you know, let me talk to the mastering engineer, who's almost always a young guy who's indignant that I didn't like it. There's an unfortunate thing I see is happening, is that I think that I don't know if it's musicians or the, you know, muggles, I call anybody who doesn't play music but just likes to listen to it. Yeah. Vanillas, I would say. I think they're starting to identify that, you know, intermodulation distortion you get on the vocal and bass as a measure of quality now, a measure of life. I hear it and I want to pull my freaking hair out. Yeah. You know, and it's because there's no excuse.
You've done a good, by the way, you've done a great job of doing that too, Bob.
You can see it's been a while.
You've done. Yeah. Sorry, mate. I'm not far. Listen, I'm not far behind you, pal. So hey, you know, I'm feeling you.
I wouldn't want it if you gave it back to me. Don't worry about it. You know, there's that. I think that somehow people are thinking, well, that means it's been mastered. I says, no, that just means it's distorting, because I can be a diva sometimes. Yeah. I think we were doing the first Extreme album. I locked myself in the bathroom for 3 hours because I didn't want to work with the producer.
Wow,
that's a true story. And it was the only bathroom.
He must have been a real. He must have been a real arsehole, though. Or were you that much of a diva? Or were you that much of a diva back in the day, mate? Or
no,
could you have been a diva?
Remember, I did all of Extreme's demos. Yeah. We did 40, 50 songs before they got a deal. Yeah. And that was the guy who produced Queen, Mac, who's a nice enough guy. It's just we were in a very difficult situation because he had done the album. The record label loved our demos, and they said, listen, let's just mix the demos. We'll have somebody mix the demos. And the band's like, no, those are demos. We want to do an album. And an album they did. But the thing is, Mac's vision of the band sounded more like Billy Squier than what was currently in vogue at the time, you know, typical hair metal sound. Mm-hmm. And the record label loved the hair metal sound. That's what we did when we did it. It sounds very dated to me now. And the stuff I did on Extreme One sounds, I don't know if I want to listen to that too much. It's kind of embarrassing, but, you know, but Mac made it. He was in a difficult situation because the band didn't really want him there anymore. That he had kind of done his job producing, and they wanted to, you know, recut some of it. And, you know, we were all living in the house together. Yeah. And he was just very austere, very German and kind of austere. Mm-hmm. And he talked so soft, you couldn't understand him most of the time. Right. I think he did it on purpose, but it was difficult, you know. In the end, you know, the record came out great. It was just, but I remember I was just super stressed out. You know, it was, to me, I was just a kid. And, you know, this is like a major album. And here I am working on this. And this guy was just disapproving of everything because I'm sure his ego was a little bit damaged because the band didn't like what he did, and but not even that, the record label didn't like it.
Right.
And before he had gone home for Christmas, he had like the 4 songs he had mixed, finished, mastered, and had the test pressing sent to the label. The label didn't call back for 10 days.
Not a good thing, is it?
And when the label called back, his question was, well, what do you think? What do you think? And he said, we'd really like to remix the demos. What Lola wants, Lola gets, right?
Yeah.
So, then we ended up redoing most of it. That was a strange experience. What was I saying before that? I said I was having a diva moment. And
you're in the bathroom doing the extreme. You said you spent 3 hours in the bathroom, and you said you can be a diva.
Previous to
be a diva sometimes. You said you can be a diva sometimes.
Yes, I can.
I just can't imagine you being that much. You're a reasonable level-headed guy.
Oh, thank you. This is what I was saying, is that working on that project, I didn't want to have anything to do with it in terms of mastering it. There's another guy, Mike Kuzi, who I also use, who is an engineer I've met working here in Florida. Was very good as well. And I think I had wanted him to do it. I don't know if the budget was there for him to do it. So Ignacio got this guy that I became very good friends with, and he did an excellent job. And because he actually respected what I did, because it's so dynamic and it's so dense, to say the least. Mm-hmm. And like, hey, this is really good. Because the thing is, it takes a lot to impress me, even on a small scale.
Yeah.
Because what I usually expect from people, especially people that I haven't heard of, or they don't have a lot of credits, and I'm like, here it comes. It's going to be super bright, mega de-essed, and it's going to be all peak limited to death. I understand necessary evils, and product delivery. Not everybody's going to listen to it on a set of studio monitors. I don't listen to it in studio monitors. I mean, any final judgment on anything I do is in my car or in a boombox upstairs in my house. But people always need to treat music, especially with respect. Whether you're mastering it or mixing it or recording it. Mm-hmm. Again, it's somebody's baby. Somebody's going to live with it forever. It's a long time.
Yeah, you know what I find really interesting in this business, when people still talk to me in mastering in terms of, the black art, I think that's the greatest bullshit myth in itself that's been perpetuated. For me, I think it's the mixers that are the heroes, because here's the thing. Why I say that is that, a mixing engineer has to make so many more decisions about a track. On a single track, we've got decisions. Do we EQ before we compress, or do we compress after? Is it dry? Is it wet? Where's the pan going to, where are we going to pan it? We're going to send this to a subgroup, and then what's the level on the fader? So just one channel, there's already 7 or 8 decisions. Whereas by the time it gets to me, I've got a left and a right channel to deal with. Any move has a global consequence across the track, and it's done. The track's bloody done. I'm framing a picture. I'm not here to repaint the bloody thing, So I think because mastering engineers don't have a great amount of prestige and profile, and I think especially in the DIY economy that we're in right now, people are still working hard to do their own mixes. They can't be bothered with the mastering.
Yeah. And it's an important creative part of the process. I mean, it can be. Some people mangle it. I mean, listen, I think it was Extreme 4, and I rarely went to masterings, and I don't know why I went to this one, but Bob Ludwig had mastered Extreme 3 and 4. Mm-hmm. And I was living in Boston at the time, so going up to Portland wasn't that far of a slog for me. And the reason I don't go to masterings is because I have no freaking clue what I'm hearing. It's a strange room. I don't know what it is. I know what it should sound like. And, I was just, sitting next to him, just observing. I wasn't taking notes or anything cuckoo like that. And people don't realize the voodoo that there is involved in it. The guy's got a lot of really nice equipment. That's what mastering guys have. Nice EQs, nice compressors, things that we don't use in mixing. I'm not going to have a Soundtech EQ across my board. It would cost half of what my gear costs,
Yeah.
This is why that person, you're a specialist. You're a specialist of another kind.
Mhm.
And, you know, he just, I watched him put the, you know, it was on half-inch analog. And, you know, he patched in, you know, different preamps coming out of the, you know, he had a ATR, and he just had, you know, he'd say, oh, this one, or this one. I got this Mark Levinson one, and I'm going to do this. And then he made a choice. They all sounded exactly the same to me, but that's because that's his job. That's his analytical mind. When you're working, that's your analytical mind at work. That's why somebody hires you.
Yeah.
And I think it's a glamour job as much as mixing is a glamour job. It's just that for a lot of people, it's unseen or it's unbudgeted, which is even worse. It's like, yeah, and we'll do mastering.
Yeah.
And, you know, for
The
me,
afterthought.
sometimes, yeah. But the thing is, and he didn't do that much, but what he did made all the difference in it. And because I have the unmastered and the mastered version here, I can A/B them. Their shades different, but I happen to like the mastered version more. You know, it's the same thing with the stuff, the most recent Black White Opera album that Ted Jensen did. He did exactly what it needed. You know, I knew, you know, I've got my limitations here with both my ears and in this room. And then here it is. It's louder. The low end's a little more punchy. You didn't destroy it. It's not all compressed and weird. And I think that people have this idea that mastering is just peak limiting it and compressing it and adding a bunch of high end to it.
Yeah.
And you're right. I'm sure the DIY kills mastering guys even more than mixing guys, because it's like, oh yeah, and I'll just make it loud. And it's not, I'll just make it loud. You're helping define things. And, you know, I was lucky enough to have, you know, had enough projects early on that were actually on vinyl. And to me, that's alchemy. That's, I don't even know what to call that.
Yeah.
You know?
That's cool.
And I'm not, it's fortunately more people are doing it now. I've had at least 3 clients, you know, take their projects and do them on vinyl. And they said, well, can you master them? And I says, not if somebody's doing it on vinyl, let them master it. It's nothing worse than mastering somebody else's mastered work.
Yeah, I find a lot of that too, though. A lot of reissue of albums, you can tell. There's just something you can tell when you listen to them, that they just took the 16-bit, you know, 44-1 master and just transferred that just to do a straight, you know, flat transfer across the board. And you can hear it a mile away. And it's just such a shame. It really is such a shame. It's like you spend 40, 50 bucks on a bit of vinyl to put it on. So it's like, oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, that's and I'm trying to remember. I think that's if I remember right now, I could be wrong, but I think the Extremes, the 25th anniversary set, the one I was telling you about, where they got the EQ master, and God knows what the EQ master was for, you know, and they were going to make vinyl from it, but they couldn't find the original actual masters because it needed to be done properly. You can't go to vinyl with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Remember back in the it was in the late 80s when they started reissuing CDs. And I had a couple Steely Dan CDs that were very clearly from a 3rd generation cassette EQ master. They were woolly as heck. And it's like record labels just put it out. Was that the master? We got it? Here it is. That's good. Put it out. People won't care. And the thing is, you know, if you can say nothing about digital, it's pretty unforgiving.
Very much so. Very, very much so.
If you suck, it's not going to get covered up. And analog, you cover it up a little bit, you know.
There's a little bit of leeway in there.
There's a certain thing that happens, though. I mean, the most recent, the Extreme, their 25th anniversary set where they had the live show we did at Hard Rock was on vinyl. And I actually still have the references of them. I don't have a record player, so I had to buy one just so I could preview it.
Oh, okay.
And it was the first time in my life that I was able to listen to vinyl in the studio where I mixed it. And it has a certain je ne sais quoi. I can't put my finger on it. Mm-hmm. It has its limitations, and, you know, I can get in a heated discussion with anybody about vinyl. It's got a certain romantic appeal to it, but you know what it sounds like by the 4th cut. And if you're not expecting that, if you're not used to it, you'd say, that's awfully crunchy, fuzzy sounding to me. Yeah. You know? But it's like everything else. It's just a delivery medium, you know? You know, are we going to, you know, what kind of canvas are we working on?
Yeah.
You know, does that make the art any less better? No. And that's, to me, that's part of the charm. To me, there's nothing like, you know, 60s jazz albums on vinyl.
Yeah.
To me, that's where it lives. With the wow and flutter and the hiss and the rumble and the noise, that's part of the quality of it.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
One of you seen the Mona Lisa reproduced digitally?
Yeah, exactly.
It would look strange.
Most definitely. Most definitely. So, Bob, listen, we could sit here and talk all day. We really could. And no doubt we'll have some more conversations post this podcast. But before we go, this is probably the longest podcast I've done, and that's a good thing. It's been exactly as I thought it would be, mate. As I said, just a really cool conversation. Just talking about all kinds of cool shit. So just before we check out, I was wondering if you could we did touch on it before, talking to young engineers and wannabes who want to get industry. So as someone that's mentored a lot of kids, for someone who's listening in or watching and they got their nose up against the glass and they're looking inside, and just a few little pointers that you would to encourage people to go out there and have a go at what they want to do. What are the things that they should bear in mind as they try and get into doing what they love to do, my friend?
How long do you need this answer to be? So I've got to tell you a story.
Go for it. Go for it. Yeah.
Anybody who's ever worked with me knows that my stories sometimes go on and on. Simon Le Bon once asked me, because he got used to my stories, he stopped me and he says, "Bob, I've got to ask you before you go any further." He says, "Does this story have a point?" I says, "No, it doesn't." "Okay, carry on." This story has a point. Yeah, okay. The only thing I ever wanted to be was a recording engineer. I was 7 years old. I was taking apart tape recorders. I was fascinated with them. It's all I ever wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I didn't know how to do it. I was a very shy kid and an introvert. I never assisted. I should have probably, but I never did, because I would have been too shy to say, "Hey, can I get a job here? Can I empty the trash cans?" I didn't even know what to do. Yeah. You know, back in the 70s, were there recording schools? There's no such thing. No. It was, and it wasn't because I wanted to work with famous people. That never crossed my mind. It's because I loved technology and I loved music. And I remember the first studio I walked into, it was, a 16-track studio. They had a Tangent console in there. They had a Lexicon 224, I remember. These were things I'd only seen in magazines, because I would pick up the magazines and read them. Most kids read comic books. I read DV and Mix. Recording engineer producer when it was still out, And I stood there in that control room, and this unbelievable sensation came over me. Yeah. Like my feet were glued to the floor and I wanted to move. And I wanted to do that so bad. And it burned in me. It burns in me to this day. I'm going to just go off topic, because you mentioned something about, what it feels like to do this every day. Mm-hmm. One of the other great experiences in my career, I worked with Tom Dowd for about 7 or 8 days mixing, and Tom was a fucking amazing guy. I don't even know what to say. The guy invented the fader, Yeah. And this guy, but I worked with him, he was in his 70s. He had more drive and enthusiasm, and boyish enthusiasm. Come on, the guy invented recording as far as I'm concerned. Right. Right. He did everything. Yeah. Super humble, super nice guy, knew everything. And he would walk in there. He was the first person in the studio, and he was the last person to leave with me every night. And he would sit for hours and tell me stories. He was the best storyteller ever. And if you haven't seen Tom Dowd in the Language of Music, get it and see it. Okay. You'll never forget. That was the exact same time. As a matter of fact, one of the bands in there was the band I was mixing. But good. Right. It was around that time. That drive, that feeling like this is where you want to be. You have to have that first. You have to qualify. Why do I want to do this? Yeah. Because it's not easy. You got to be prepared to have your phone shut off and your car insurance canceled, and you're going to be living with 2 other guys. But the thing is, you've got to want to do it more than anything. With your nose pressed to the glass, you'll know you have that sensation. You're looking, going, I want to get in there. I want to touch the knobs and get my hands on the console and create something. If you show me an angry person, I'll show you a person who can't appreciate art and doesn't have it in their life. Yeah. Because art surrounds us. Look at us. We get to make this incredible and tangible thing that is the soundtrack for people's lives. Absolutely. Like music, like popular music. Like More Than Words is a perfect example. People say, oh, I love that song. I got laid to that song first. I had my first kiss, whatever. It represents something. It's more powerful than your olfactory lobe. Jogs your memory back. How many times have you heard about somebody who had Alzheimer's, but they could sing?
Absolutely. There's someone on Facebook about now, Bob. You know what? I'm using my battery to tether off on the 4G, and it's been. And you know what? Can we do another podcast at some point, down the track?
Absolutely.
I've often said to people, "Oh, we should get you back," but you know, dude, we've definitely got to get you back sooner before anyone else, because you got some great stories, and I love your attitude, I love your vibe, and I just want to say from a personal viewpoint, how grateful I am that you because in your world, mate, I mean nothing, and you were gracious enough to accept my invitation, and we had some great conversations, and we connected, and we've had a fantastic podcast. It's exactly as I thought it would be, and
Awesome.
again, thanks so much for your just for your wisdom and what you contributed here, and yeah, man, we'll do this again real soon.
Excellent, Jack. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was good fun. All right. Well, thank you very much, Bob. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. So that was Bob. That was Bob's and John. I know I keep saying it's my favorite podcast. It's my favorite podcast. But favorite fucking podcast. That was fucking awesome. I really don't want to go. You know, my daughter had a song. My daughter actually, very quickly, my daughter actually wrote a song when she was little, and every time I used to leave to go to work, and she'd always say, you know, well, no, I would sing the song to her, but she helped write it. It was like, I don't want to go, but I have to go. Ooh. You know, so I'm singing that song right now. So, all right, then. Well, listen, thank you very much to the Cave Hub, who are great supporters of the podcast. They're at 18 Bond Street in Abbotsford. You want to get your pre-production done for rehearsal space. It's a great venue. Go check them out. And also to Omega MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, my coach, George Soteropoulos. Bus, big respect to you, my friend. So for those of you who want to get fit, go down and check us out in Collingwood. It's a great club, great people, great attitude, and you know, want to get fit, or you don't have to become a UFC fighter like George was, or be an ultimate fighter or anything like that. Just for good fitness and for good fun, and get your cerebral thing happening. Go check them out, Amiga MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Collingwood. Okay, I'm out of here. Thank you very much, everyone. And as always, say please be nice to each other, but more importantly, be nice to yourselves. I love you, fuckers. We'll see you next time. Okay, see ya.